functions. So cosine is similar. Let's take a look at what the normal cosine, just y equals cosine x, looks like. It also has, we would go in those increments of pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, and 2 pi. But the cosine of 0 is 1, so it starts up here at 1. The cosine of pi over 2 is 0, so it comes down here. The cosine of pi is -1, so when we get to pi, we're back down to -1. 3 pi over 2's cosine is 0, so we come back to 0 and back up here. Okay, so that's kind of ugly. That's supposed to look the same, but my drawing's not great. Okay, and it repeats on this side of the axis also, so pi over 2, pi, -3 pi over 2, -2 pi, it repeats. Okay, so that's our typical cosine function, drawn pretty ugly, but it is there nonetheless. Okay, we're asked again to find the amplitude. You find the amplitude for a sine function or cosine exactly the way you do for sine. It's the absolute value of this number that's multiplied by your cosine. So my amplitude would be 4, which just means instead of these waves going up to 1, they're going to peak up at 4 and down to -4. Okay, the period for cosine is also a period of 2 pi. It takes 2 pi for this pattern to repeat. Notice every 2 pi it starts over again. And again, for something to happen to that, you have to multiply something by your x. We did not, so our period is still 2 pi. Okay, all right, so here we go. 0, the normal cosine function would be up at 1, but since this is multiplied by 4, ours is going to start up at 4. The cosine of 0 is 1. 1 times 4 is 4. We're going to put our markers on here. We have pi over 2, pi, 3/2 pi, and then 2 pi. And on this side, negative of each of those. Okay, that is how far they asked me to graph, so that's what I'm going to do. I want to make sure I cover all of that ground from -2 pi to 2 pi. Okay, we would start up here. When we get to pi over 2, we need to cross at 0 because the cosine of pi over 2 is 0. And even if you multiply that by 4, it's still 0. Okay, so it's going to come down. Okay, then on this end, we're going to come down to -4 when we hit pi because the cosine of pi is -1 times 4 would give us -4 down here. Come back up 0 at 3 pi over 2, and then back up to 4 at the top here. Again, this is not perfect, but on this side, we need to cross through 0 at -pi over 2, hit down at -4 at pi, and we need to go up 0, 3 pi over 2, and we peak up at 4 again. This would be from -2 pi to +2 pi, the graph of 4 cosine x. Now if we have -3 cosine x, our amplitude that they're asking us for, again, is the absolute value of this number that's multiplied in front. And you might say, well, why the absolute value? And that's because the amplitude is a distance, and you can't have a negative distance. Okay, again, it's the distance from the middle here to the peaks, the middle to the base. It's the distance between your peaks and your troughs divided by 2. Okay, so it's going to be whatever number's multiplied here, the absolute value of that, which comes out to be 3. The period, again, nothing has happened here with the x, so our period is still just 2 pi. That's how long it normally takes a cosine function to repeat, and that's still how long it's going to take this one to repeat. Again, that can change on a graph, but in this example it doesn't. All right, so let's take a look. What would multiplying by -3 do? Well, the negative would make it reflect over the x-axis. So instead of starting up here at 1, it would start down at -1 and move upward. Okay, the 3 makes it 3 times as high. It makes the amplitude 3. So now, instead of being down at -1, we're going to go clear down to -3 to start. Again, you can plot points if you're more comfortable with that to make your graph, or you can just use the shape of the graph. Okay, so 3 and -3 is how high and low I know I need this to be. It's not translated up or down at all, just stretched. And my pi over 2, my pi, my 3 pi over 2 and my 2 pi, and the same, the negatives over here of each of those. Okay, we're going to graph this. I'm going to start right here at 0. So again, the cosine of 0 is 0, but we're multiplying, or excuse me, is 1, but we're multiplying that by -3, so we're starting down here at -3. At pi over 2, the cosine of pi over 2 is 0. If you multiply it by -3, you're still at 0. The cosine of pi is -1, but if we multiply then by -3, we get up to 3 up here. The cosine of 3 pi over 2 is 0. We come back down. The cosine of 2 pi is 1, but again, we're multiplying by -3, so we end up down here at -3. The same pattern is repeated on this side of the graph. Okay, so there's our graph from -2 pi to +2 pi. Notice it's just a reflection of this one, and this one is stretched 4, while this one is just stretched 3.